The sky over Windermere, a small and charming coastal town in New England, was heavy with thick clouds that late, cold November afternoon. In the parking lot of the modest Harper's Market, Evelyn Miller struggled with a torn grocery bag while her 4-year-old son, Noah, begged for a juice box she knew she couldn't afford. Widowed for 2 years, Evelyn juggled 3 jobs to cover rent, daycare, and medication for the boy's chronic asthma. Wearing worn-out clothes but still carrying eyes that shone with dignity, she placed her few items on the checkout counter. Whole wheat bread, milk, rice, and 2 eggs. The card declined. She tried another. And another. Silence. Embarrassment. The clerk, impatient, called for the next customer. Noah started coughing, and Evelyn nearly broke down. But then a firm and elegant voice cut through the room. "I'll pay for everything." The man wore a tailored navy blue suit. His light brown hair tousled slightly by the wind, and a gold watch that gleamed without boasting. His name was Nathaniel Carter, heir to the Carter Holdings real estate empire and a regular figure on business magazine covers. But in that moment he wasn't a CEO. He was simply a man witnessing something that shook him in ways he couldn't explain. When he saw the woman trying to hide her face in shame, holding a sick child while the world ignored her, something inside him trembled. With a subtle gesture, he paid for everything, quietly expecting no thanks. But Evelyn looked into his eyes, and it was as if time froze. It was a gaze full of scars, of silent battles, and also of a strength that felt almost divine. He felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. No woman had ever looked at him like that. Not even Claire. Claire Hamilton had been his fiancée for 4 years, a senator's daughter as ambitious as a hurricane. Tall, blonde, and sophisticated, she was the perfect match for gala dinners and national TV interviews. But behind the camera lenses, Claire hid a sharp temper, a disdain for ordinary people, and an obsession with status. Nathaniel had proposed to her to please his mother, a socialite who saw Claire as the key to keeping the family image flawless. But in recent months, he could barely stand her presence. Every word was a judgment, every smile a mask. And now, standing before Evelyn with her disarming simplicity, he felt something he had never known before. Peace. Not luxurious, not ambitious, just peace. Evelyn, on the other hand, was stunned. That man could very well have been a mirage, an angel in human skin. She thanked him quietly and tried to leave with Noah, but he insisted on helping her to the car. On the way, he asked about the boy, and she explained that Noah had suffered from severe bronchitis since birth, that his father had died in a construction accident, and since then, everything had depended on her. Nathaniel listened without interrupting, his eyes fixed on hers, trying to decipher how the entire universe could fit inside a woman so fragile and yet so incredibly strong. When they said goodbye, he didn't ask for her number, didn't offer extra help, he simply said, "I hope to see you again." She nodded, convinced she never would. But fate, that old trickster, was already planning their next encounter. The very next day, Nathaniel showed up discreetly at the school where Evelyn worked as a library assistant. He said he'd forgotten something important at the store, her smile, and apologized for the boldness. She laughed for the first time in weeks, and he felt his chest open. So began an unlikely friendship, built through playground meetings, lunchtime conversations, and quick coffees between shifts. Evelyn tried to keep her distance. She knew men like Nathaniel lived in a world where women like her were seen only in charity campaigns. But he was different. The way he listened, asked about Noah, praised her homemade cakes. It all felt too sincere to be mere politeness. And as the days passed, the truth became impossible to ignore. Nathaniel was falling in love. Every laugh from Evelyn was like a symphony he had never heard before. But the problem had a name, a last name, and a diamond ring on her finger. Claire. When she found out he was spending time with a random, poor, single mother, as she made sure to say, she erupted in a hysterical rage. She threw a vase against the wall of their Manhattan penthouse and demanded he cut all contact. But Nathaniel, for the first time in his life, didn't give in. And in that sudden burst of strength, he realized something terrible. He was trapped in a love that had never been real while losing the chance to live something genuine, even if imperfect. Enjoying the story so far? Then subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and leave a comment below telling us what kind of love story you'd like to see next. It helps us bring you more stories that truly touch your heart. Nathaniel couldn't stop thinking about her. Evelyn's voice echoed in his mind like an unfinished melody, warm, real, and unfiltered. Back in Manhattan, everything felt hollow. The city buzzed with luxury, ambition, and facades, but none of it could drown out the memory of her laughter beside the schoolyard fence. For the first time in his life, he skipped meetings. He ignored boardroom calls and investor luncheons. Instead, he found himself driving back to Windermere under the excuse of checking new development opportunities. The truth. He just wanted to see if her smile still lit up the afternoon air like he remembered. Each visit became longer, each goodbye harder. Noah had already started calling him Nate. And something about the boy's tiny hand holding his made Nathaniel's world tilt on its axis. He wasn't just drawn to Evelyn. He was beginning to need her. Evelyn, however, was torn. Every woman dreams of a prince. But Nathaniel wasn't a fairy tale. He was real, and that made things complicated. He wasn't just charming and attentive. He was dangerously kind. And kindness, she'd learned, came with consequences. She'd seen it before. Men who offered warmth like spring rain, only to vanish when the sun came out. She didn't want to get hurt. She couldn't afford to believe. Not for her. Not for Noah. But the more Nathaniel showed up, bringing picture books for her son, helping her fix the faucet in her tiny apartment, asking about her late husband with genuine interest, the more Evelyn found her defenses cracking like old paint on the walls. She laughed again. She told him about her dreams. And every time he listened like her words mattered. She feared she was falling into a life that would never be hers to keep. Back in the city, Claire could feel him slipping away. She wasn't stupid. She had spent her entire life perfecting the art of control, of sculpting her image, shaping people's expectations, managing reputations. But Nathaniel was different lately. Distant, distracted, and worse, disobedient. He stopped answering texts. He declined public appearances. And when she confronted him with lipstick-red fury, he had the nerve to say he needed space. Claire, of course, did what she did best. She began digging. In less than a week, she knew everything. The woman's name, her address, her job at the school. She even knew what kind of juice her kid drank. Claire seethed. "That girl is charity, not competition," she hissed to her mother over champagne. But something in her cracked. For the first time, Claire felt what she had never allowed herself to feel. Fear. Because this time, Nathaniel didn't seem like a man distracted. He seemed like a man already gone. Nathaniel tried to explain things. He invited Claire to dinner at his private suite, prepared to be honest. He told her there was someone else, someone who made him feel human again. Claire laughed. First she thought it was a joke. Then, when she realized he meant it, her laughter turned bitter. She reminded him of the empire at stake, of his family name, of the Carter legacy. "You think love matters in our world," she snapped. "This isn't a Nicholas Sparks novel, Nate. You don't get to play savior." But Nathaniel had already made up his mind. He didn't want to be a legacy anymore. He wanted to be a man. And being a man meant standing by what made his soul feel alive, even if it meant walking away from everything he was supposed to be. The next morning, Evelyn found a letter taped to her apartment door. Handwritten. It said only, "Come find me at Windmere's old lighthouse. If you're ready to let me in." She stood there for minutes, the paper trembling in her hands. Part of her wanted to throw it away. Part of her wanted to run. But the largest part, the part that had been silent for years, wanted to believe. That night, under a navy sky scattered with stars, she climbed the path to the lighthouse. There he was, alone, waiting. No watch, no tie, no arrogance. Just a man who looked at her like she was the only home he'd ever known. He didn't speak. He let the silence say it all. And when she stepped closer, when she whispered, "I'm scared," he held her hand and said, "So am I. But I've never been more sure." They sat there for hours, watching the waves crash below. Evelyn told him about the nights she cried alone, about the guilt of not being enough for her son, about the way she felt invisible in a world too fast and too loud. Nathaniel listened, not like a billionaire, not like a savior, but like a man who had finally found the one story he didn't want to rewrite. He told her he didn't need her to be perfect. He didn't need her to be polished. He just needed her to be real. And Evelyn, for the first time, allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, love wasn't something you chased. It was something that found you when you least expected it, and refused to let go. Evelyn woke the next morning with a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in years, maybe never. It wasn't the giddy kind of love that belonged to fairy tales or high school fantasies. It was something deeper, solid, grounded, as if someone had finally seen every crack in her and chosen to stay anyway. Nathaniel had kissed her forehead before she left the lighthouse and whispered, "Let's build something real." That sentence kept repeating in her mind as she made breakfast for Noah, buttering toast with trembling hands. But alongside that fragile hope was fear. A love like this didn't come without a cost, and she knew the world he came from. Ruthless, spotless, sharp like crystal, and just as fragile. She wasn't naive. That world would never welcome someone like her. She didn't have a last name that opened doors. She had bills, stretch marks, and a child who still believed superheroes were real. But Nathaniel had said he wasn't going back to that world. He had chosen her. That had to be enough. For a while it was. Their days were slow and honest. Nathaniel spent weekends helping her with Noah's science projects, surprising them with ice cream picnics in the park, and reading bedtime stories like they were sacred scripts. He laughed more, slept better. The circles under his eyes faded, and his voice no longer carried that cold, clipped tone. He was becoming someone else, someone lighter, freer, deeply in love. Evelyn found herself smiling at strangers, humming while she folded laundry, believing again. She started writing again too. Little poems in the margins of grocery lists, fragments of dreams she'd buried when her husband died. But just as she began to imagine a future, holidays, shared mornings, sleepy coffee kisses, it all began to unravel. Nathaniel was still tied to a world that didn't let go easily. And that world was about to come knocking. It started with a headline: Carter heir spotted in small town with mystery woman and child. Evelyn saw it at the register in Windmere Market. Her fingers frozen over the scanner. Her heart sank. She hadn't realized anyone had been watching, but of course they had. Nathaniel wasn't a man. He was a brand. And brands came with paparazzi, with whispers, with bloodthirsty curiosity. That night her phone rang non-stop. Reporters, bloggers, gossip columnists. They called her names. Some sweet, some cruel. Some hinted she was a gold digger. Others painted her as a tragic Cinderella. Evelyn turned off the phone, drew the blinds, and held Noah tight, whispering lullabies through tears. When Nathaniel arrived, she didn't speak. She just handed him the newspaper. He read it in silence. Then he looked at her and said only one thing: "I'm so sorry I brought this into your life." Nathaniel tried everything to protect her. He called lawyers, bought privacy services, offered to move her somewhere safer, quieter, away from the media glare. But Evelyn refused. "I don't want to disappear," she said. "I just want to be enough as I am." Her voice cracked. "And I want to know that you'll still love me when the cameras leave and the world gets bored." Nathaniel reached for her, but something was breaking between them. Something unspoken and fragile. He wanted to shield her. She wanted to stand tall. And in that space between protection and pride, love began to ache. They didn't break up. Not exactly. But Evelyn stopped returning calls. Nathaniel stopped pushing. And the silence grew louder than any headline. Meanwhile, Claire watched everything unfold like a lioness circling wounded prey. Claire hadn't just watched from afar. She had acted. The article was no coincidence. She had called in favors, leaked tips, crafted narratives with the cold precision of a seasoned tactician. Watching Nathaniel unravel over some single mother felt like watching a king throw away his crown for dirt. Pathetic. But what Claire hadn't expected was that it would hurt. Deep down, past the vanity and control, she still wanted him. Maybe not for love, but for power, for image, for the fairy tale ending she had crafted since prep school. She couldn't let Evelyn win. And if Nathaniel wouldn't come back willingly, she would force his hand. She filed a lawsuit against Carter Enterprises, claiming emotional damages and breach of engagement agreement. It wasn't true, but truth was never the point. The point was leverage. And suddenly, Nathaniel found himself trapped, not just by Claire, but by a world he thought he'd escaped. The news exploded. Scandal, lawsuit, and lies. Carter Empire under siege. Evelyn saw the headline and felt her knees weaken. She wanted to call him to say she knew this wasn't him. But the doubt whispered, had he really left that world? Or had she just been a detour? Nathaniel, meanwhile, stood in a boardroom filled with lawyers and board members questioning his judgment, his loyalty, his sanity. All he could think about was Evelyn. Her laugh, the way she touched her son's hair when he was asleep, the way she made him feel like a man and not a myth. He left the meeting halfway through. He had only one thing left to do, find her. Not to explain, not to defend, but to ask one final question that would decide both of their futures forever. Nathaniel stood outside Evelyn's apartment building in Windermere, his hands trembling in the pockets of his overcoat, the winter wind slicing across his face like punishment. He had never felt this exposed, not even during hostile business takeovers or high-stakes courtrooms. This wasn't about reputation. It wasn't about empire. This was about her, and the truth she deserved. He knocked once, then again. Nothing. He was about to turn away when the door creaked open. Evelyn stood there, eyes hollow, a tired sadness darkening her features. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "Not with everything going on." But Nathaniel didn't flinch. He stepped inside slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal, careful not to spook the moment. "You deserve to hear it from me," he said. "Claire is doing everything she can to destroy what we have. She never loved me. She loved the Carter name. I should have ended it years ago." Evelyn crossed her arms, silent. "Then why didn't you?" she asked. The question hung like fog between them. He sat on the edge of the couch, eyes pleading, voice low. "Because I was a coward," he confessed. "I thought I could live a double life. Play the game, wear the mask, keep everyone happy. But I couldn't breathe anymore, Evelyn. Then I met you." She looked away, as if trying to protect herself from the weight of his words. "You say all the right things, Nathaniel. You make me believe in things I gave up on. And then the world reminds me that I don't belong in your life." He stood up, walked toward her, not too close. "You belong in my life more than anyone ever has. I don't want the world. I want you. Even if it costs me everything." Evelyn's voice cracked. "What if I can't give you everything? What if all I have is who I am now? Worn out, afraid, a single mom with no fairy tale ending to offer." He reached for her hand gently. "Then that's everything I want." She didn't pull away. That night they sat on the floor, knees touching, the world outside falling silent. Evelyn told him everything. The fear, the exhaustion, the guilt of wanting a man who already belonged to another world. Nathaniel listened like it was scripture, nodding, murmuring, never interrupting. She cried. He cried too. No grand declarations. No sweeping orchestras. Just two broken people whispering promises into the quiet. He stayed until dawn, curled on the floor with her and Noah asleep beside them. For a brief moment it felt like a family. But the morning wasn't kind. Evelyn woke to knocking, hard, urgent, insistent. She opened the door and there she was. Claire. Impeccable. Eyes gleaming with venomous calm. "So this is the fantasy," Claire sneered. "Charming. Dirty floors, sticky children, and a man who doesn't know who he is anymore." Evelyn didn't answer. Claire stepped inside without being invited. Nathaniel stood up, instantly protective. "You need to leave," he said, stepping between them. Claire smiled, that rehearsed smile that once made magazine covers. "No, darling. You need to choose. Either come with me now and fix this mess, or lose everything. The lawsuit, the board, your inheritance, your name. It all collapses unless you put an end to this peasant soap opera." Evelyn flinched at the word. Nathaniel's jaw clenched. "I already made my choice," he said, grabbing his coat and Evelyn's hand. "You don't scare me anymore, Claire." Her face twisted, disbelief morphing into fury. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You think love will pay your legal bills. You think she'll hold up when the vultures come. They always do, Nathaniel. They always leave." But Evelyn didn't leave. She stepped forward, stood tall, and said, "I'm not afraid of the storm anymore. I've already lived through worse. And I'm still here." Claire stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled. Silence returned, but it wasn't peaceful. It was raw, pulsing with the aftermath of everything said and unsaid. Nathaniel sat down, eyes fixed on the floor, his heart a battlefield of love and ruin. Evelyn knelt beside him, her voice a whisper. "That was brave. But now what?" He looked at her, and for the first time his voice trembled. "Now we rebuild. Maybe not fast, maybe not easy, but real." Outside, the winter wind softened. Snow began to fall. Gentle, slow, quiet. Noah woke, rubbing his eyes, and asked, "Is it Christmas?" Evelyn laughed through tears. "It might be," she whispered. Nathaniel reached for her hand again. This time she held on tighter. They didn't have the answers, but they had each other. And sometimes that's where redemption begins. But just as it seemed like love had won, fate had one more twist waiting in silence. That evening, as the snow kept falling in slow, graceful spirals outside the window, a sharp knock interrupted their fragile peace. Nathaniel opened the door to find a courier holding a gold-trimmed envelope. Cold, official, ominous. He didn't need to open it to know who it was from. The Carter family legal office. The words on the page cut deeper than any insult. "You are hereby summoned." A clause had been triggered, one buried deep in the engagement contract he had signed with Claire's family years before. A stipulation that, if broken, would not only dissolve his financial rights to the Carter estate, but also initiate a court-mandated investigation into his business ethics. His legacy, the company, his name, it was all on the line. Claire had found her final weapon. Nathaniel's hands shook as he folded the letter, jaw tense, fury rising behind his ribs. He turned slowly to Evelyn, who was sitting on the floor, Noah leaning sleepily against her. "It's not over," he said, voice lower than a whisper. She looked up, her eyes no longer wide with fear, but lit with something stronger. Resolve, clarity, the unshakable love of a woman who had already survived heartbreak once, and now knew how to fight for something real. "Then let's finish it together," she said simply, and stood up beside him. Her hand found his, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in her grip. The woman the world had called not enough was ready to stand in front of that world with him. She would face the vultures, the courts, the cameras, whatever it took. Because what they had now wasn't a fairy tale. It was a choice, battle, a love worth bleeding for. And they weren't backing down. The courthouse steps were colder than Evelyn imagined, even under the noonday sun. Paparazzi swarmed the marble like insects to sugar, their flashes piercing like gunshots. Noah clutched her hand, his little fingers trembling, and she bent down to whisper, "It's okay, baby. Just hold tight." Nathaniel emerged from the black car beside them, expression carved in steel, flanked by two attorneys in charcoal suits. He glanced at Evelyn, gave a small nod. Not the confident kind, but the one that says, "I see you. Need you." She stepped forward and stood beside him, straightening her coat, chin lifted like a queen without a crown. Inside, the courtroom air was dry and heavy with tension. Claire sat opposite them, a pale pink suit stretched across her rigid frame, her smile tight and cruel. Her father, Victor Carter, loomed beside her, gray hair, predatory gaze, and the cold presence of an empire built on fear. He looked at Nathaniel as if seeing a child who had disappointed him. The judge called the room to order, and opening statements began. Evelyn sat quietly behind Nathaniel, clutching Noah's backpack like a lifeline. The Carter legal team came out swinging. Claims of betrayal, violations of engagement agreements, financial mismanagement. Every sentence was lined with venom. Then Nathaniel's attorney rose, calm, composed. He painted a different picture. A man trapped in an arranged life, misled by old family ties, manipulated by legal threats, and now breaking free for love, not scandal. Evelyn could see Claire squirm slightly at the word love. It didn't belong in her world of alliances and signatures. But this case wasn't about love to the court. It was about power, legacy, image. And slowly, Evelyn began to see just how deep the Carter claws had sunk into Nathaniel's world. Financials were dissected. Contracts were scrutinized. Private emails were read aloud. And suddenly a photo was shown. Nathaniel, Evelyn, and Noah in a grocery store aisle. The moment it had all begun, Evelyn gasped. Her face, stunned and vulnerable, stared back at her from the courtroom projector. Nathaniel looked over, guilt pressing down like a stone. He hadn't meant for their world to bleed into this one. Claire leaned in toward her lawyer and whispered something. Moments later, the courtroom doors opened, and Evelyn's parents walked in. She froze. She hadn't seen them in over 5 years. Her mother's eyes were red-rimmed, her father stone-faced. Claire had summoned them, and now on record they were to speak about Evelyn's past. Her failed marriage, her financial struggles, her dependency on wealthy men. The words stung like fire. Evelyn's voice caught in her throat. "I'm not that woman anymore," she whispered to herself. But the courtroom didn't care about growth, cared about patterns. Claire was winning, not with truth, but with shadows from a life Evelyn had buried. Noah began to cry softly, confused by the tension. Evelyn held him tightly, shielding his head, her tears silent. During recess, Nathaniel found her outside in the cold hallway. "I didn't know she'd do this," he said, breath visible in the air. "You don't deserve this." Evelyn's voice was quiet but resolute. "I do. Because I walked back into your life knowing there would be consequences. And I don't regret it." Nathaniel stepped closer, close enough to smell the winter in her hair. "We'll get through this." Evelyn looked him in the eyes. "Will we?" There was a beat of silence. And then she added, "Because if you walk away now, I'll understand. I won't hate you for it." Nathaniel took her hands gently. "The only place I'm walking is into that courtroom. With you." And he did. He returned to his seat with new fire in his gaze. And when called to testify, he did what no one expected. He told the whole truth, not the corporate version, not the rehearsed statements. He spoke about Evelyn, about meeting her, about how she changed him. Gasps rippled through the courtroom when he said, "She saved me." Claire looked like she'd been slapped. The judge warned him to stay within the scope, but he continued, "I'm not ashamed of loving someone who has struggled. I'm ashamed that I ever thought love had to be hidden or sanitized." Reporters scribbled. Cameras flashed. Claire's lawyer objected, but Nathaniel kept speaking. "If the price of telling the truth is losing everything, I'll pay it." And with that he stepped down. Evelyn's hands trembled. For the first time, someone had defended her not as a burden, but as a miracle. As they left the courtroom that day, the media erupted. But inside the black car it was quiet. Noah had fallen asleep, head in Evelyn's lap. Nathaniel reached across the seat and touched her face. "No matter what happens," he said, "this was worth it." And she nodded, tears brimming, heart splitting wide open. But later that night, another envelope arrived. No gold trim. No formal seals. Just a white letter, written in Claire's handwriting, left anonymously at the door of Evelyn's apartment. Inside it read, "You think this is over? It's not. You took what was mine. Now I'll take what's yours." Underneath, a single photo. A grainy image of Evelyn walking with a man who wasn't Nathaniel, from a decade ago. Evelyn's stomach dropped. It wasn't what it looked like. But she knew what Claire was doing. She wasn't just trying to break them. She was trying to ruin them. And if Evelyn didn't act fast, Claire might succeed. Evelyn stared at the photo for nearly an hour, her hands numb from gripping it too tightly, eyes scanning every blurred corner for something she could use to defend herself. The man beside her in the image was Julian Hall, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in years, a ghost from a time she wanted to forget. He wasn't a lover, but he had once pretended to be. Back when Evelyn worked nights at the Baxter Hotel as a receptionist and needed to protect herself from a manager who wouldn't stop harassing her, Julian had offered to pretend to be her boyfriend. It worked, but they had no real romance, only survival. The photo didn't show that context. All it showed was her smiling beside him, hand on his arm. Claire had weaponized a snapshot, stripped of its story. Evelyn knew what would come next. Claire would leak it. Social media would devour it. Headlines would twist it. The Carter PR machine would resurrect old rumors, add new lies, and drag her name until it was unrecognizable. And worst of all, Noah might see it. Nathaniel arrived not long after, coat dusted in snow, eyes searching her face before she even said a word. Evelyn handed him the photo silently. He studied it, jaw tightening, eyes darkening. "Who is he?" he asked calmly. But there was something fragile under the question. Evelyn explained everything. No edits, no excuses. Just the truth. Nathaniel didn't interrupt once. When she finished, he looked away, shoulders tense. And Claire has this. She nodded. She dropped it off last night. No return address, just her handwriting. He exhaled slowly. She's playing dirty. Evelyn moved closer. I won't blame you if this is too much. Nathaniel turned back to her, this time with fire in his voice. I'm not going anywhere. But I need to know, if more comes out, are you ready to face it? Because this isn't just about us anymore. It's about the boy in that room who thinks we're his safe place. Evelyn swallowed. Then we fight, she said. Not just for us. For him. The following morning, headlines exploded. Nathaniel Carter's new flame exposed. Mystery man in Evelyn Hayes' past raises questions. Scandal deepens in billionaire's breakup. The images were everywhere. TV, Twitter, newspapers, gossip blogs. Even the breakfast news ran segments speculating on whether Evelyn had a secret lover. Reporters camped outside her apartment. Strangers hurled insults online. A journalist approached Noah's school. That was the breaking point. Nathaniel called an emergency press conference. Cameras flashed like lightning as he stood before a sea of microphones. What you see in the media is a distortion, he said clearly. Evelyn Hayes is not a scandal. She is not a threat to anyone's legacy. She is the reason I found mine. The room stirred. We all have pasts, he continued. The question is whether we let them chain us, or free us to love better, deeper, and without shame. Evelyn watched from the backstage curtain, her heart in her throat. And for the first time, the audience didn't laugh. They didn't mock. They listened. But Claire wasn't finished. That night, Evelyn received a call from the hospital. Her parents had been admitted after a car accident, an apparent brake failure. Panic surged through her veins. She rushed to the ER, Nathaniel beside her. Noah left with a trusted neighbor. Her mother had a broken wrist. Her father suffered cracked ribs. But they would recover. The strange part. The accident happened just minutes after they left a meeting with Victor Carter, Claire's father. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Was it coincidence? Or a message? Nathaniel made calls. Quiet ones. To people who owed him favors. Background checks. Discreet surveillance. Days passed in tension. Evelyn barely slept. And then, a file arrived in a brown envelope. Evidence that Claire had paid someone to unearth Evelyn's records, and possibly more. Bank transfers. Hotel footage. Surveillance logs. Everything pointed to Claire crossing the line from bitterness to danger. Nathaniel knew then. She wouldn't stop until she destroyed them all. So he made a choice. One that Evelyn begged him not to. He filed a restraining order against Claire and cut all remaining business ties with the Carter conglomerate, an empire his father had helped build, and one that now branded him a traitor. Board members resigned. Investors panicked. But Nathaniel didn't flinch. What's money, he told Evelyn, if I lose my soul in the process? She looked at him then, not as a billionaire, but as a man finally free of golden chains. The media turned again. Public sympathy grew. And Claire, for all her power, began to look small, bitter, unhinged. But Evelyn knew the cost. Nathaniel had burned bridges that could not be rebuilt. You gave up everything, she whispered. He smiled faintly. No. I finally claimed something. She reached for his hand, heart breaking open with something fierce and fragile. "Me?" she asked. "No," he replied. "Ourselves." Still, peace did not come quickly. There were lawsuits to settle, lies to dispel, trust to earn. Evelyn went back to work, not as a receptionist, but starting her own women's shelter for single mothers. She gave interviews, but only when it helped the cause. She kept her life with Nathaniel and Noah sacred, shielded from spectacle. They moved into a modest brownstone in the quieter part of town. No penthouse, no limelight, just mornings filled with pancakes and school runs, and nights curled up with stories under thick blankets. One evening, as snow fell outside, Evelyn found Nathaniel in the kitchen, staring out the window. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. He turned, wrapped his arms around her and whispered, "That I almost married someone who didn't believe in grace. And I nearly lost the one who taught me what it means." She smiled through tears. "We didn't lose. We're here." But just as she was about to speak again, a knock came at the door. 3 sharp raps, then silence. Evelyn exchanged a glance with Nathaniel. It was late. Too late for visitors. He opened it slowly. On the porch stood a young woman, no more than 20. Her coat was thin, her eyes rimmed with fear, and in her arms, a baby. "I'm sorry," she said, voice trembling. "Are you Evelyn Hayes?" Evelyn stepped forward. "Yes." The girl held out a letter. "This is for you. From Julian Hall." Evelyn's stomach twisted. The girl continued, "He died last week. I'm his sister. He wanted you to know. The baby is yours. Not biologically, but he left her in your name. Because of something you did. Something you said saved him." Evelyn took the child, stunned, silent. Nathaniel stepped beside her, hand finding hers again. A new chapter had begun. The days that followed felt like a storm slowly clearing, revealing a horizon full of fragile hope and new beginnings. Evelyn cradled the baby, Lila, Julian's daughter, her heart swelling with a mixture of fear, hope, and fierce love that burned brighter with each passing day. Nathaniel never left her side, his presence a constant shield against the world's chaos, a quiet promise of protection and unwavering support. They navigated the complicated dance of new parenthood, blended families, and the scars left by Claire's relentless cruelty with trembling courage and fragile smiles. Yet in every moment of hardship, their bond deepened, weaving together a tapestry of trust, understanding, and dreams yet to be realized. Noah warmed to Lila as if she had always been part of their world, and Evelyn began to understand the true meaning of family. Not the one defined by blood or wealth, but by choice, sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty that transcended all odds. One evening, under the soft glow of kitchen lights, Nathaniel looked at Evelyn with eyes full of gratitude and whispered, "You saved me when I thought I was lost. Now, with you and the kids, I finally feel whole in a way money never gave me." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears as she reached for his hand, feeling the weight of all they had endured melt away in that tender moment. "We are healing together," she whispered, her voice trembling with hope and relief, as if that simple truth could rewrite their past. But their fragile peace was shattered by a sudden call, the hospital. Evelyn's parents were in critical condition after a second suspicious accident that felt like a dark shadow reaching for them once again. This time, it was no coincidence, no accident, but a calculated strike born of malice and jealousy. Nathaniel and Evelyn realized Claire's final act of vengeance was more dangerous than ever, threatening to tear apart the fragile threads holding their lives together. But they refused to be victims, refusing to bow to fear or hatred. Together, they worked with the police to uncover evidence linking Claire and her father to a series of sabotage attempts aimed at destroying Evelyn's family and the fragile peace they had fought so hard to build. In the courtroom again. This time it was Claire and Victor facing the harsh consequences of their actions. Not just for harassment but for attempted harm that had scarred the souls of innocent people. The judge, once skeptical and influenced by the Carter name, now saw the undeniable truth. A woman driven by envy and desperation trying to tear apart what she could never have or understand. Nathaniel and Evelyn testified side by side, stronger than ever. Their love a beacon shining through the darkest moments, a testament to resilience and truth. Claire's arrogance crumbled beneath the weight of justice and exposure, revealing a fragile, broken woman consumed by bitterness and pain. As the verdict was read, guilty, Evelyn felt a profound release, as if a heavy chain had been broken, freeing her heart to finally breathe and dream without fear. The courtroom erupted quietly, not in celebration, but in relief. A collective exhale of justice served and hope restored. Months later, the family celebrated a quiet Christmas in their brownstone, far from the chaos that once threatened to consume them. Snow blanketed the streets of Willowbrook, muffling the world's noise and wrapping the city in peaceful white silence, a stark contrast to the storm they had endured. Lila giggled as Noah dangled a handmade ornament above her crib, innocent joy radiating through the room, while Nathaniel held Evelyn close, whispering promises that no wealth could buy, promises of forever and faith in their love. They had been tested, torn apart, rebuilt, and in the fire, their love had been forged unbreakable, stronger than any force that tried to break them. Evelyn looked out the window at the glowing lights, feeling the warmth of the season fill her soul, and thought of Julian, not with pain but gratitude. His final gift wasn't just Lila, but the reminder that love, even in its most unexpected forms, could redeem and transform the deepest wounds. As the night deepened, Nathaniel knelt before Evelyn, pulling out a simple ring. No diamonds, no extravagance, just a symbol of the journey they had survived and the future they would build together, imperfect but real. "Will you marry me?" he asked, voice steady with hope, vulnerability, and the strength of a man reborn by love. Tears slipped down Evelyn's cheeks as she nodded, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment and the promise it held. "Yes, to everything we are and everything we'll become," she whispered, voice thick with emotion and certainty. The warmth in that room was enough to thaw any lingering shadows from their past, filling the space with light and the undeniable power of second chances. Outside, stars sparkled like silent witnesses to a love that had conquered storms, shame, and fear, a cosmic applause for the hearts that refused to give up. Their story wasn't perfect, no true love ever is, but it was theirs. Raw, messy, real, and profoundly beautiful, carved from pain, hope, forgiveness, and endless courage. Evelyn and Nathaniel knew that life would bring more challenges, unexpected twists, and heartbreaks, but they also knew one truth above all else. Love was their greatest power, their fiercest weapon, and their surest redemption against any storm. And in that quiet moment, wrapped in each other's arms, they let the world fade away because finally they were home. Home in each other, home in the imperfect but unwavering love they had fought so fiercely to claim. It was the kind of ending that was really a beginning, the kind that makes hearts believe again.